everyone. It is 3:30, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. I am Sarah Murray, the coordinator of Sustainable Practices here at Metropolitan Community College, and we are excited to be hosting the final SLPS of the 2017-2018 academic year. We are presenting today on Organizing for a Sustainable Future, and Joe Higgs is the Executive Director of Institute for Public Leadership, which provides training for Omaha Together One Community. Joe has worked as an organizer for nearly 30 years in Texas and more recently in Nebraska with several different coalitions of congregations and community organizations. With Joe today is Greta Carlson. She is also with the Institute for Public Leadership as project organizer as part of the Lutheran Volunteer Corps. Greta will be assisting with Q&A following the presentation. A little quick housekeeping note, if you do have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat box on the WebEx, or you can get on Twitter and use the hashtag SLPSThursday. With that, I will pass it over to Joe.
Well, thank you, Sarah, very much. Greta and I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be in this beautiful campus and we'll talk with you about something we both care about a lot, which is sustainability and organizing. And what our hope is today is to talk with you about some of the most important practices of community organizing and to try to help you think about how you might apply those in the communities that you're working and living in around sustainability issues. In that context, we're going to talk from our experience working with leaders of Omaha Together One Community, but we hope that the practices we talk about will definitely be applicable to you wherever you are in the state of Nebraska. So just by way of introduction, Institute for Public Leadership is the training affiliate of Omaha Together One Community, which is now a 22-year-old coalition of institutions, both congregations and community organizations. So as you can see, it's a fairly diverse group of congregations, and it's also in recent years we've begun to work with groups with whom we partner on specific issues. So we work with, Habitat on housing issues, or we work with Refugee Empowerment Center on refugee issues. A couple of organizations we actually work with pretty closely that are not Solidarity members, as the Sierra Club and the Green Omaha Coalition. OTOC is part of a larger network called the Industrial Areas Foundation, which is about 75 years old, and there's probably 70 affiliates around the United States and several other foreign countries. And all of them are what we call broad-based power organizations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. As broad-based power organizations, we focus on developing the power to act together. And we use the elements of this, what we call the cycle of organizing, listening, researching, acting, evaluating, as some of the fundamental tools that we use to develop power. We're going to go over that then in this presentation. So if you're interested in building power, you've got to be interested in listening, right? And let me talk to you a little bit about what that means. Sustainability, let me take a step back. Sustainability, I think, as I was looking at that, means something that's upheld or supported over time, something that's sustained. And in environmental science, I think that means supporting the ecological balance over time so that the environment is sustained. And we're interested in sustainability because we live all together on this planet. I think sustainability is related to power in the sense that if you don't have power, you don't really have the capacity for sustainability. And what we think of as power is the capacity to act. Power is simply the capacity to take action on your values. We believe that power comes in various forms, but the two most prominent ones are organized money. It's not hard to see that in play if you look at elections, if you look at corporate action, if you look, all kinds of ways that people make things happen with lobbyists. Organized money gets things done. But the other form of action is organized people. When people get organized and work together, and two or more people with a plan are the potential for power. But they have to have people and they have to have a plan to work together. So we teach then that the practices of organizing help people develop power. Now, if you're interested in power, you've got to be interested in listening. One of the fundamental ways to listen is through something we call individual meetings. So individual meetings is really probably the most fundamental thing you can do if you want to build relationships within your school group, within your organization, within any effort to work where two or more people are involved trying to develop a plan. You've got to know one another. And so part of what we really try to teach people is take the time to do short, what we call individual meetings, meetings of 30, 45 minutes, where your focus is not on the task, it's how do I get to know this person? What are the stories that really matter to them in their lives? What's their motivation? Why are they concerned about sustainable issues? Who are they connected to? Who matters to them in their life? Are they doing this because they're worried about their grandkids? Are they doing it because they've had an experience themselves out, experiencing the natural world? What motivates them to be concerned about sustainability issues? Okay? One way of thinking about that really is you're trying to understand each other's interests. Okay? You're trying to understand each other's self-interests. A lot of times we think, oh, self-interest, that's bad. No. Because we lump it all together with the idea of selfishness. We think, oh, I don't want to be selfish. I couldn't have a self-interest. Well, that's really, we're not talking about selfish interest. We're talking about what's your self-interest. And your interest is, if you break the word apart, it literally, means between. The word intercontinental, means between, and S is sort of the Latin word for being. So what your interests are really that which is between the beings, that which connects you to other people. So your interest is what are the things, who are the people, what are the things, what are the causes to which you are most connected. So you won't know me unless you really know to whom I'm most connected, what do I most care about. In some ways you think about it, what will I sacrifice for? What will I spend my time and my energy and my money on? If you know those things, you're going to know my interests. Why do you want to do that? Well, if this is somebody you potentially want to collaborate with, if this is somebody you potentially want to work and form a plan with, you've got to know them. You've got to trust them. They've got to know you and trust you. And sometimes you're going to disagree. You're going to have real different views on what ought to be done. But if you've got the fundamental, if you've got the basis of a relationship, you will be able to get through that. So one of the questions you might want to ask is this someone I think I can work with? Is this someone who I see as a leader? Because if you're trying to build power, 2 people are great, 4 people are better, 8 people give you a lot more capacity to act. So you're also looking for people who have that same sort of relational attitude that they can attract other people, that they care about other people. So ideally, what you're trying to do is to find people with whom you can relate to, and these are people who can relate to other people, because together you can build a team of people who will take action together, form a plan and take action together. So fundamental practice, regardless of whether you're a big organization or a little organization, is think about, do we know each other? Are we spending some time doing relational meetings? And so actually I want to ask some of you, if you think about the organizations you're part of, whether it's a church, whether it's a school committee, how many times have you actually sat down with a person that's part of that and gotten to know them, gotten to know their story a little bit, been willing to share your story? Or are you like me and most of us, our tendency is when we sit down, we get right to task. And we spend almost all of our time doing that. And when it's over, we rush off and we do another task. And I'm going to suggest to you, that people who really thought through organizing about 75 years ago, that really started the craft, said this is the most radical tool of all, is people getting to know each other in a really more deep and fundamental way so that they can act together. So that's the first thing I want to say to you. If you're interested in change, you've got to be interested in listening, and you do that first through one-on-one meetings. Once people have done one-on-one meetings, another good thing, an important thing to do, is to have what we would call house meetings or small group meetings. And it's great for 2 people to talk to each other, but there's something else that changes when maybe 8 or 10 people get together. And again, these aren't huge groups. You want to have a group that meets in a quiet place where people can hear each other, where they feel comfortable telling their story. And you don't meet forever. You meet for an hour. People know that this is a fairly short, directed meeting where there is somebody whose job it is to interrupt and to make sure everybody gets the chance to share so that it's not somebody going off on a long harangue. You have an open-ended question where people get a chance to share what's on their mind. They, again, tell stories. They say, what are they concerned about? Why are they concerned about it? They get a sense of who are the other people in the room. And one of the reasons why we found that to be such an important practice is it helps people to realize, I'm not the only one that's concerned about that. It's a sense of solidarity. It's a sense, maybe we have the potential to do something about it, that I've been frustrated because I don't feel like anybody listens to me. I'm the only one that cares. Well, maybe you're not. And maybe you realize you're not the only, maybe your issue is only one of several issues that people care about. Sometimes in sustainability circles and others, people think that their issue is the only issue in the world. They get so committed to it, but when they hear other people's concerns and stories, they realize, well, maybe I need to put this in perspective because people have multiple interests. They're connected to multiple things. So house meetings, we find, are a way for people to get a bigger perspective on what's affecting families, what's tearing at the fabric of families, and how, they might work together. Now, one of the critical things that we try to do in both individual meetings and house meetings is to have an ending that says, well, that's really interesting. It sounds like these three things are a concern to us at this house meeting. If you knew that there were other people who wanted to work on this, if you realized you weren't the only one, would you be willing to work on it? Is that something you'd invest some time in? So there's always kind of a proposition or a next step. Remember, you're looking for leaders. You're looking for talented people. And that means people who are willing to take some action, people who might bring somebody with them. So what you're doing in an individual meeting or a house meeting is trying to find, is there somebody else who might work together with me on this? Okay? You're not telling them, oh, if you get involved in this, here's a long list of things I'm going to tell you to do, and I'm going to make you the chair of this, and here's the assignments that I've got. No, that's the way to drive people away. But if you say, if you're interested in this, would you be willing to work on it, help shape it, and help figure out what to do on this? So you leave it as open-ended as you can. And some people won't like that because they want something very specific and concrete. Just tell me what to do. But honestly, what you're looking for are the people who want to create, the people who want to work with you to create something new. All right? I'm going to now kind of tell you a little bit about how we use these two things and how we began to work really on sustainability issues. So those are examples of small group meetings people have. They can be a little bit bigger than that. But in some of you who've been around Nebraska for a while remember, in the fall of 2012, OTOC had a series of house meetings, and they do that at least every other year, sometimes every 18 months. They really commit the organization to, once again, listening again. What's on people's minds? What do they care about? So this was the fall of 2012. Well, some of you who've been around a while probably remember that in 2011 we had a pretty big flood. The Missouri River flooded and kind of threatened the airport. And in the summer of 2012 and 13, if you remember, there was a big drought that kind of baked the state. And we started to see newspaper stories, and people began to kind of question what's going on. Is the climate changing? These are kind of folks who haven't paid attention too much to sustainability issues, and who just were, ordinary folks in the pews started asking, what really is going on? Is this going to affect my grandkids? And so we started to hear about that in house meetings and in individual meetings. We started to hear people saying, I wonder, should the church do something about this? Is this something we should be concerned about, but not really knowing what to do? So when that started bubbling up in individual meetings and house meetings, we began to start to look at, well, maybe we should look at sustainability issues. Now, I've been an organizer, as I said, for about 30 years, and I'll guarantee you my initial concern was, do what? It's so big. What are we going to do about droughts? What are we going to do about floods? I think climate change is real. I don't have any question, but what are we going to do from Omaha, Nebraska on that, And so I was kind of, like a lot of people, just puzzled. Is there anything I can do other than recycle or other than try to, drive carefully with my car? What can I do beyond myself? And so I was reluctant, I think, at first to figure out, is there something that we as a group could do? So I began to think about, one of the fundamental principles of community organizing is something called the iron rule, right? The iron rule of organizing. We all know what the golden rule is, right? From the audience, what's the golden rule?
Treat others as you wish to be
treated. Treat others as you would have them treat, you. And that's what a lot of church people kind of always ready to think about the golden rule. Well, the iron rule of organizing was articulated first by a guy who really articulated a lot of the initial ideas of community organizing, Saul Alinsky, in the back of the yards of Chicago, which was a very poor kind of immigrant community in the meatpacking areas of Chicago back 75, 80 years ago. And his iron rule was never, ever do for someone what they can do for themselves. Never, ever do for someone what they can do for themselves. Now, thinking about that, I don't know if I can dialogue with your audience or not, but why do you think the iron rule matters when you're trying to get people to work together?
It empowers them.
Yeah. You're saying to people, look, if this is to happen, you've got to do something. You've got to have some skin in the game. You've got to claim the ability to act. If you don't, it may not happen. You know, if you can care all you want about it, but if you're not willing to do something about it, chances are it's just going to sit there and nothing will happen. So the idea of the iron rule of organizing is to invite people to become involved, to become invested, and to take action themselves. Now, 8 out of 10 people, that come to a house meeting or you have an individual meeting, won't want to do anything because their lives are busy, their family situation won't permit it. They just can't right now. But 20% of the people may. They'll say, oh, all right, you mean I could do something? Okay, yeah, well, I don't know what to do. Okay, that's easy. We'll figure that part out as long as you're willing to learn. So part of what the iron rule of organizing says is you create opportunities for people to learn, and then you see, are they willing to learn? So I'm suggesting to you, too, wherever you are in the state of Nebraska, if you may know a lot of things about environmental sustainability. You may have all the answers, but if you act like you do that, if you tell people what they should do, they're not as likely to become involved as if you help them go on a journey of discovery and leave it more open-ended. Because they may have somewhat different interests. They may know things that you don't know. And I think part of our problem is we get so fixated on an agenda right away. This is what needs to happen. I want you to do this. This is how you can help me do this. Instead of saying, what do you want to do together? What really burns you? What really gets you moving? Okay? That's how organizing is maybe different than, say, activism around specific issues. So, one of the things we decided to do once we had this series of house meetings in the churches is to say, and we also do this every couple of years, is have what we call an issues conference, which says, okay, we've had a lot of issues surface in these meetings. Some of them are things that we've been working on for years, like immigration, and some of them are really kind of new, like this whole sustainability thing, or mental health, or this was back when people were first starting to try to get the state to expand Medicaid, So all of those surfaced in that period of time, and we said, let's do an issues conference. And basically we held it in a church. About 150 people came. We said we're going to have 2 different sessions, plus some plenary ones, and people can choose what they go to. So in a sense, it was a plebiscite by how people would vote with their feet. Do they come to it, or do they just ignore it? So we helped some leaders who already had expertise prepare some workshops, and they led the workshops. Or in the case of environmental sustainability, we had nobody with expertise. So we had one of your former speakers in this, whose name is escaping me, led the workshop for us and kind of just opened up and had really a broad-based discussion with people. What do you think's going on with the environment? What do you think the issues are? What matters? And one of the things that we did then through that issues conference, let me just see where we are, is we figured out what is it that people might want to do. And the problem was people generated about 20 different things. They made this list of 20 different things that they were concerned about. But good fortune, the good Lord, whoever you want it, good timing, somebody attended who actually I had encouraged to come, was an organizer from the Sierra Club, who'd actually been working for 2 years in North Omaha around a campaign to try to get the coal plants in North Omaha to stop burning coal. And for those of you who don't know this area, it's a very old power plant. It's one of the oldest in the country. It was actually grandfathered, and so it was one of the dirtiest coal plants in the country. And there's lots of asthma in North Omaha. There's lots of other kind of environmental concerns. A lot of people pointed the fingers at those very old plants that produce more pollution than any modern coal-burning plant would. And so he said to this group of people, and about 40 people came to the workshop, so it was a substantial group. And about 15 people said afterwards, yeah, I'd be willing to work on a committee. And most importantly, 2 people said, I'd be willing to convene it. I'd be willing to try to help shape it. The question then is, what do we do? You know, what could we do out of these 20 things? And fortunately, this young organizer from Sierra Club said, you know, well, there's this important decision that's going to occur sometime in the next few months that says OPPD, Omaha Public Power District, is going to be making a decision that's going to affect how they generate electricity for the next 20 years. They don't do this all the time. This is a once in 20 years decision where they're going to put in place their generation plan. And so, you know, for me as an organizer, I'm like, okay, we're not talking about clean water. We're not talking, you know, it involves clean air. We're not talking about general things. We're talking about a decision that's going to be made in the next 3 to 4 or 5 months. There's a board that's in charge. You know, we kind of have an idea, is there something we could do to help contribute? And so when the team got together a couple of weeks later, we went through all these options, and I kind of encouraged people to think about that. And they said, yeah, that's something we really ought to learn about. And so one of the distinctions I want to help you all think about is when we talk to people, a lot of times we hear about problems. Okay, there's the problem of, I don't know, clean water. There's the problem of, in sustainability terms, of garbage, you know, of litter. There's all these problems. And we would think of in organizing terms, a problem is something that is fairly general, right? You're not really sure who's in charge. There's no clear process for decision making. How do you do something to change that? Okay? And you're never really quite sure if you solved it or not, if you've come to a conclusion or not. So problem is just a lot of times the problem of crime, the problem of healthcare. They're so big they feel overwhelming, and you spend all your time just like wallowing in it. So part of the idea in organizing is how can we turn that problem into an issue? How do we understand that well enough? How do we break it down? How do we figure out what's a specific part of this? Is there somebody in charge? Is there a particular thing that's financially possible to do, you know, that we could really, and is there a time frame that we could win in? You know, it's got to be done before we all die. So part of the work of organizing is to help people figure out, we can't solve everything with sustainability, but is there an issue in there that we could do something about? And that's really what, when our folks got together, they realized, yeah, let's learn about this. Okay, let's see if there's something in this we can make a difference. So the next part of organizing, after you've identified people and after you've identified an issue that you care about, is to learn about it. Because so often people kind of want to jump right in and say, all right, let's do this, but they don't really know anything about it. So, as I said, kind of the goal of that, of the next phase of learning is to figure out what do we do about it. So one of the things that OTOC is very good at is inviting people in who are experts, people who can teach us. I don't know if you know some of those folks in there, but there are some local and state experts on. Dwayne Haborka has worked at the state level on environmental sustainability. The head of the Big Garden is there to the right. Some other. So we have oftentimes what we call issue cafes, where we get small groups of leaders really learning from somebody who knows something about it. So the first thing we did in the OPPD situation is we've got to kind of learn about it. We've got to get our head around power generation, because nobody really knew much about it. The second thing, once they started to learn the basics, they said, well, let's talk to the staff of OPPD. Because we know what Sierra Club thinks, we got their take on it. But let's see what the people who are doing this as their business. Let's kind of hear from them what they think. So we invited them out, and they had their power. They had their presentation, and they had their communications people and their vice president in charge of public relations, and they kind of brought us the whole package of what they were doing and how they were listening to the community, and very good presentation, and how we should trust them to make the right decision, which, we were learning. And so we said, okay, great, thanks, that's very helpful. But one of the things we realized was the staff who were there were not really the decision makers, right? They're not the ones. Now, they may shape the decision because they know more about it than most people, but Omaha Public Power District, like all of the other power districts in the state of Nebraska, is a public power district, which means what? They have a board. And how does the board get in place? They're voted in by election. That's right. And so this is a unique place. Nebraska has a unique opportunity to shape the public power district policies, right? Staff does a lot because they're on the ground, but elected officials ultimately make the decisions. So the next decision was, let's meet with our elected officials. And so we met with the president of the board. We met with several other board members. So it's interesting because they would never let the elected officials come by themselves. They always had staff come with them. So we would meet with them, and we would let them know, we're a bunch of church people, and we're a bunch of community people. We're not the people who come to your board meetings all the time. We're not environmental activists. We're kind of like really concerned about this decision you're going to make because it's going to affect our families, our rates, and the environment for a long time. So tell us what you're thinking about it. And OPPD 4 years ago, that didn't happen a lot. I mean, people did not call board members and say, we want to meet with you. Mostly they would go to board meetings and they would speak, but board members weren't really accountable much to go out into the community and kind of explain themselves. And so that was the beginning, I think, that they realized something different is happening. So ultimately, we met with 4 or 5 of the board members. We were trying to figure our way out. And then about 6 weeks before the board was ultimately going to make the decision, OPPD came up with what they called their 5 top options. They considered 15, and they came up with 5 options, which you don't need to read those to try to get them, but that's what they presented out in the community. And they wanted people to tell them which did they think was the best. And the problem was, and none of those options were very good. None of them ended.
They look almost identical.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, the bar charts and everything, they look the same.
But if you'll notice, if you look at over the 20 years, one of the things, their reliance on sustainable sources, with the highest that would be at the end of 20 years was, I think, 23%, the highest one. And none of them completely shut down the coal plants in North Omaha. They all had them sustained over some period of time. And quite honestly, the people who've been working on this for 2 years, from the Sierra Club and some of the groups they had, were really ticked off because it felt like, wait a minute, we've been giving you 2 years of input, we've been working with you, you promised we're going to be happy with this, and you give us this, none of which is very good. And so, we as people who'd only been involved a couple of months had a little bit more perspective on it. And again, another organizing principle is you can really love a particular solution, right? You can really think that is the only way to do it. But you've also got to be willing to give and take and negotiate and find out what is a winnable solution. Because we don't get everything we want. We don't have the power to tell them this is what you should do. So I remember a couple of nights before they were going to present these 5 options to the board formally. They presented to the community first, and then said, we're going to explain these to the board and talk to the board, and then the board is going to vote a month later. We had a meeting, and we were part of that meeting with the people who've been organizing for 2 years, and they were angry about how none of these did what it should do. And they were really ready to go down there loaded for bear, ready to go after the board in a couple of days. And our folks were, because maybe we hadn't been so invested in it for 2 years, said, well, let's just meet afterwards for a few minutes. Let's kind of talk this over. And, had 2 or 3 of their really best experts that had thought about this a lot, said, what would you think would be the best solution? I mean, if you could get what you wanted, that you think we could possibly get, what would they be? And we kind of talked through those with them. And we just sort of started to make a list of what did they think would be good, but what do you think we really got the capacity to do? And out of that, our leaders basically decided, all right, let's do some action. Because once you've done a lot of research, once you've formed relationships, once you've identified issues, once you've done some research and figured out what's the right thing to do, ultimately, you've got to take action. You've got to do things that make things happen. And in organizing, what we say is action is the oxygen of the organization. It keeps you alive, right? If all you are is a study group or a debating group or, oh, if only we could do this, but you never do anything and see what reaction you get, you're by. So what we think about is the action is in the reaction. You take action, and it may be good, it may not be as good as you want, but what matters is what's the reaction? What do you generate? What response do you generate? So we knew it was time to get involved, and we've done a lot of study to take some action and do something about it. So I'd suggest to you, don't wait till everything's perfect in doing a project. Don't wait till you've got everything lined up and you understand it perfectly. Do something and see what you learn from it, okay? So what we did then, out of the meeting after the meeting, was create an agenda. that our folks wrote up, and it was very simple, put in fairly simple terms. You know, we want to promote conservation and energy efficiency to reduce demand by 1% a year. A big one that was understandable. We want, their highest was 23% after 20 years. We wanted it to be 33% by 2018. We wanted to use natural gas only as a means of meeting peak demand, not generating base load, and we wanted, most importantly, stop burning coal at the North Omaha plant. And we didn't put a timeline. We fudged and said as quickly as possible because we didn't frankly know. But, you know, again, that's kind of the politics of the situation. We didn't mean 20 years from now, but we wanted the final end of coal in North Omaha. So what's significant about that is it was our leaders then developed a little 2 or 3 paragraphs about each one of those, and then they went to the board meeting that 2 days later, and they presented it to them. Each 4 different leaders, each presented a section, said, you know, we know there's a lot of concern about this, there's frankly some anger about it. We think this is a way forward. We think that these are reasonable approaches. And, you know, the groups that had been working on it put a lot more heat into it. They were angry, so it was a little bit of good cop, bad cop. But our folks said, we think this would be the way forward. And then, importantly, because this is a political question, it is being made by elected officials, they put up, they circulated petitions, they put up an electronic website, they got clergy to sign on the things, and they probably got 400 or 500 people to say, yeah, those principles make sense to us. And we got people to sign on, and they got, they got people to call in, they got people to try to raise the, the heat on this a little bit. So again, you need to think about, if you want to make progress on some issues, you've got to think about who are your allies. You may have a burning passion to do something about it, but you've got to be able to explain it to others in a way that makes sense to them. And then you need to try to engage them and say, well, if you care about this, will you take some action? So don't be shy about inviting people to support you. Don't be shy about saying, write your, your city councilman, write your congressman, get involved. Go talk to the board, the administrator for that department. Get involved. And so ultimately, out of that month of doing that kind of work with some fairly reasonable proposals, OPPD made a decision, and we didn't put the whole article, but it says OPPD plans to retire all North Omaha stations fired units. Now, it's not going to happen. 3 of them got retired quickly. 2 more of them are going to be transitioned out by 2023, and they're going to become gas-burning units. But there's an end to it, right? That part has happened. And then, just that little piece of it said basically what we had, we were so pleased about. They spent months finding, getting feedback, but they created a hybrid plan. And that's essentially what was crafted out of all of those community groups working together, saying, we will not accept any one of these plans. They're all bad, but here's some elements that we think would make sense. So I think that was an example where we came in and helped people who've been working for many years. They really made the groundwork. We gave them the extra push of broadening it to a bigger set of people who are not environmental activists, that were just kind of like normal, in the pews folks that said, the environment really matters to me. I won't call myself an environmentalist, but this matters to me. And I think that helped shape board opinion on what to do with that. So importantly, I'd say build support, educate people. So that was what their plan looked like. And I think it says in there 33%, it gives some of the elements. That was the ultimate one they made. So let me just say, what is an action then? So we don't run out of time. That third piece of organizing is, first of all, it's planned. Now it says they're months and weeks. And we do. When we're planning a big action with, with candidates for office, we plan that way ahead. This case, it was, planned a couple of days ahead, but at least it's planned. You don't have people going down to City Hall wondering what they're going to say. Oh, the spirit will move me. No, people write what they're going to say. It sequences the first to the second to the third. It's coherent because elected officials will turn you off in a heartbeat if you're, ranting. So first of all, it's planned. Secondly, there's actors, and people know their role. They have lines. They have a script. At least that's the way we do it. They kind of agreed upon what is it collectively we're saying. There's a stage set. I'll show you some pictures in a minute where we had public meetings, but there's this atmosphere. There's a stage that's set. And there's some tension. You don't just say, oh, well, we know you're going to do the right thing, and we really trust you. And just tell us what you'd like for us to know. No, there's some tension in it. We say, this is what we think you should do, and this is why. And if you're not creating tension, you're not asking for enough. You're not pushing the envelope enough. So you need to create tension where you can. And then in our public meetings, we ask for yes or no answers. We don't, some people won't give us those, but then we say, all right, your response is maybe, or there's no response. But we say, will you commit to this, or will you not? Yes or no. Okay? So that's how we practice action. I would suggest to you, wherever you are, if you want to make something happen, plan it ahead of time. Think about who's doing what. Put a lot of time and effort into making sure that you do the best action, because that's how you're going to get the best reaction, right? You can't control the reaction, but that's your best shot if you're planned and prepared and don't sort of leave it to the spirit of the moment, okay? And finally, importantly, is you want to ask afterwards, if you want people to grow and learn, how did we do, right? You take time immediately afterwards and then maybe a couple of weeks later with some distance to kind of ask some questions. How did we do? Some of the things you may ask is, what went well? What didn't work so well? What did we learn about ourselves? What did you learn? I remember one of the leaders who was down at OPPD the very first time, and she got up to the point of having to speak, and was like, I can't do this. I just do it right. I just can't do it. I've never done this before. And we talked with her, we encouraged her, and finally she just said she couldn't do it, so we had somebody else step in and do the role. Now what's ironic is another couple of times when she was ready to stand up, and you almost couldn't shut her up because she'd seen, okay, other people did it. I can imagine myself doing it, but you got to process that with people. You can't write them off and say, all right, but help people process their experience and learn from it. What did you learn about power? What did we learn about getting the board to do the right thing? Well, it mattered a lot to have a lot of different diverse allies, a lot of people involved in it. And you think about who really looks strong. Who are some people we could really help build this around? Are there some people who really said they were going to bring people, they did bring people, who said they would prepare, they did prepare, who really looks good? So those are all kind of the cycle of organizing. It begins with listening and getting people involved and engaged. Once you've figured out what you care about, you've got to research it and figure out what is it that you can do. You've got to learn about it so you can take focused action. But ultimately, you've got to take action. And it's through that action that you'll get a reaction. You'll make something happen. It may not be what you want. Ultimately, then, you evaluate. What did we do? What's left to do? Who really looked good? And I think these are principles that work throughout, life. I don't think it's just if you happen to have, a coalition of congregations. I think it could work in your school setting, in your classroom. I think almost anywhere you follow some of those, you'll get further than if you kind of just go all over the place. So we've got about 4 or 5 more minutes. I'm going to just run through some slides real quickly about some other sustainability issues that we've worked on, and then we'll be happy to open up for questions. If you have any, please send them in. Be happy to do it. One of the things we did is we had an action back with candidates for Congress, and those are 2 candidates from the 2nd District, Mr. Ashford, who was the congressman at the time, and his challenger, Mr. Bacon, who's now the congressman. And, one of the things I said, with the action that you do is you set the stage. Well, one of the things we try to do is have a large group of people come, because with candidates, they tend to pay more attention when they've got, 350 people in the church hall or a room than they do when there's 35 people. And so they tend to feel like they need to come, and they need to answer your questions honestly and hopefully in favor of what you've asked them. So, for instance, one of the things we asked Mr. Bacon, or both the candidates, was, if you are elected, will you join the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus? And neither of them actually even heard of it, because we always meet with them. We always brief them, we always give them information beforehand. Will you do this? And so when you meet with elected officials, you've got to treat them with respect. You've got to give them information. You've got to educate them and realize that most of them have 100 things they're following. You've got to make this come up on their agenda. And, both of them committed that day because they were in front of a lot of people. And Bacon, because of his military background, seemed to know and be concerned about climate change. And so then he got elected in November, and by February, he released a statement saying he had joined the Bipartisan Solution Caucus. He had to join it with a Democrat, because you always have to have a Democrat and a Republican to join. And what's significant is he was the first Republican from the interior of the country. All the other Republicans until that point had been from California or Florida or coastal communities. So he was kind of one of the first ones from the Midwest who said, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And he said, this was a promise I made to my constituents in my district, and I keep my promises. So getting yes or no answers is sometimes a very good thing. It's not like, oh, well, I'll look into it, or maybe. We got him to say a firm yes, and in fact, he did. Secondly, another issue, and this is actually very current in Omaha, and it may be in other places in the state, is we asked candidates, again, at a mayoral accountability session this last May, before their election, we support the separation of yard waste from garbage. Because in Omaha, they had been separated for many years, a separate collection, and the yard waste was taken off to compost, and it was turned into compost. But then the company that was doing it didn't have the capacity to keep them separate, so they began to collect them together. And some of you may know, what's the problem if you put a lot of yard waste together with garbage? What does it produce? Methane, right. And what's the problem with methane?
It's a greenhouse gas.
It's a very powerful greenhouse gas. And so our landfill has been producing just oodles and oodles of methane since they've been collecting it. Now, they capture some of it, and they use it to generate energy, but they don't capture all of it. And so the problem is we're about to enter into another 10 and possibly 20-year contract for how we handle our yard waste and our garbage. And there are some who would like to have a perpetual commingling of them, putting them all together, because frankly it's cheaper and easier just to throw it all into the same bins. And there are some of us who we argue, we think we should separate it because it's bad for the environment. We think that we need to find a way. And so what we asked was, will you assure us that there will be a bidding of both of those, that we can get an idea of what it would cost? We realize it may cost more to have a separate stream, but we think it makes sense. And as recently as then people have been following up with council members and talking to them, trying to educate them, and as recently as March the 30th, the president of the council said, one of his overriding concerns is for the environment, which option is less toxic? Dumping, composting, or dumping? Well, obviously, he realizes the environmental issue. He's just not clear on which is the best. But several of the other council members also, they separate, they favor it. So for those of you in Omaha, I encourage you to contact your city council people and ask them to push for separating garbage from yard waste. In the long run, it's going to be better for the environment. If they won't do that, then we're really insisting that they figure out how do you capture all of the methane. What do you do to make sure that the methane that's generated as much as possible gets captured? So that's a very current issue. We were among the first to publicly raise that with them in the big setting and to educate people about it. Because most people, if you look at that audience, not even 2% of them knew anything about that issue, before they came in. So part of the work is to educate colleagues. Finally, if you want good things to happen, you've got to have board members who realize they're accountable and who realize that the public cares. So we've now since September of probably 2014, every time there's a board election, we've had an accountability session or a candidate session with candidates for OPPD, the Public Power District. And that has been historically kind of a real sleeper organization where nobody much paid attention. As long as my rates are low, I don't really care about it. We began then to have accountability sessions where we ask candidates about issues. And, there are now 4 candidates up this year, and all 4 of them have drawn opponents, which is unusual because many times people run unopposed. And there are 2 people on the board now who were elected last time who are much more open to thinking about questions of sustainability. We don't endorse candidates, we never will, but we do want people to be educated about sustainability issues. So if you care about your public power district, wherever you are in the state, find out who's on the board, find out when there are elections, and find out what are the issues that you can ask them about, and make them pay attention to, because otherwise they won't pay attention to it. We've got, one of the other things we do is, because we're congregation-based, find time to renew your well of energy and spirit. And for congregations, we've had lots of opportunities where we get together, we do prayers, we learn about some of the when Pope Francis wrote his encyclical Laudato Si about the environment, We studied that and we talked about it, and we really helped people realize, oh, this is pretty mainstream. This isn't out there. This isn't, quote, tree huggers. This is right in the middle of where church people should be doing. So whether it's churches or whether it's democracy, be involved in helping people realize, no, this is really about the future of our children. This is about the future of the planet. This isn't, out there. This is really mainstream stuff we should be thinking about. So I'm going to go ahead and stop. There's one more thing. If you ask me about it, I'll tell you about. This is if you want to get a hold of us or ask questions, you can go on either of those two websites, send us an email. We'd be happy to help you get connected to a group. We have an environmental sustainability group that meets actually tonight. They always meet the first Thursday of the month at 7 at First United Methodist Church in Omaha. They always welcome people to come. Wherever you are in the state, I know there's people thinking about this. Get connected because you're going to have a lot more power if you work with others than if you try to do it all yourself. So we're open for any questions about sort of the process of organizing for sustainability.
How would you say that the house meetings are different than just a regular meeting? Is there any difference between house meetings?
Yeah, so a house meeting is set up with the purpose of, first of all, it's an hour. You really try to keep it so people know that they're not going to be there all night. Secondly, there is a person who's prepared to lead the group and kind of lays down some ground rules that everybody gets the opportunity to share. We're really asking to tell stories more than issues that you've heard about on the news or the latest thing you've read. We really are trying to get you to reflect on your personal experience with something and kind of share with others that. And the purpose of it is going to be to see, are there some things that are affecting our families that we have concerns about that we might work on together. So the house meetings we tend to have are open-ended. So they are open-ended. They tend not to just be about one issue. So somebody might be concerned about Medicaid, somebody might be concerned about environment, somebody might be concerned about prison, mental health. So part of why we have this multi-issue agenda, is we want to be able to work on whatever it is that there are a group of people who say they work together. So we're listening for environmental issues, but that's not the only thing we're listening for. But that kind of a meeting, you want to constrain it a little bit. Say, all right, we're not going to do this forever. We want you to share stories about your personal experience, and we're going to invite you, if you care about that, to look at taking the next step. So it's not just come and unload.
Maybe some ideas how to find the people, like organizing through online or going to the community events, seeking out other leaders.
Yeah, how do you find leaders? Well, that's a very good question that we work on. Greta, you come and sit around here with me. That's an ongoing endeavor. So one of the things is to think about, what is a leader? How would you define a leader? How would you define?
You were talking about someone who would take action themselves, someone who's creative.
Willing to take action or take risks, somebody who's creative. Those are all qualities of a leader, potentially, that you're looking for. But leader is a relational word, right? What does it imply? If you are a leader, you have
somebody.
Yeah, you have followers, right? So one of the things you want to look for is who has people who have, or we would call followers. But to have a follower, for me to follow you, what do we have to have?
A relationship.
A relationship, exactly. So what you're looking for is relational people, right, who other people respect and follow and listen to. What we say a leader is a person who has a following and who can deliver that following. So that if it's enough of a relationship that he says, will you do this? Will you come to this place at this time? People will actually show up, because that's a test of, does that person really have a relationship? Greta, you're doing work trying to leaders. What would you say? How do you find leaders?
Yeah, a lot of it is having one-on-ones, and I asked another organizer recently, how do you know who to ask who to have one-on-ones with? She's like, well, you have a lot of bad one-on-ones, right? So you're at a meeting, you pick out some people to meet, and if they go well, you're like, great, that's like good. I followed some sort of cue in my brain, or it won't be so good, and you're like, why wasn't that good, or why did I think they were great and then they didn't turn out to be what I was looking for? And places like OTOC, you know, we have our people that are pretty consistent. It's really easy for us to be like, oh yeah, you want to work on this, we'll connect, we'll give you this person's email, they'll help you out. It's a lot harder when there's not that, you know, there's not an organizer around telling you who to meet with, right? So those types of things, you know, go to the Power board meeting and see who's there, which organizations show up every time. Like those are the types of things, like identifying those places where you can plug yourself in and become a leader for them, or finding people that show up by themselves, like, you know, have they found an organization they want to join? Can you make some sort of organization with them?
Above all, keep your eyes open, be curious, be open, you know, just kind of look for people. Is this somebody I'd like to work with? And then try to get to know them a little bit, try to get them to know you. Because it's not instrumental, it's not, oh, who do I find that I can use? It's who do I find that I might have a relationship with, and together we can develop a relationship with other people. So look around, I guess, and go to places where good people are.
Olivia, do you have any questions coming in?
We do. We have 3. The first one is, so it's in reference to the abolition of the death penalty. So this person was involved in that. They canvassed around, and a lot of people were on the side of the unicameral's decision to abolish the death penalty. But the big money was behind the effort to repeal that legislation, and then the big money won. So how do you work effectively against the big money campaigns and against disinformation campaigns?
Boy, I hear you on that one, because OTOC leaders also got involved in trying to retain the repeal of the death penalty. I mean, they fought and did a lot of training and teaching people why we should, you know, continue what the legislature had done, which was realizing Democrat and Republican, conservative, liberal, they all realized this is not serving us well. It costs us a lot of money. We risk putting people to death. All kinds, every reason in the world to say we really don't need the death penalty. But as your questioner points out, there was some, you know, big money that is able to easily feed into people's fears and prejudices and kind of stoke, you know, responses from people. How do you combat that? I think information, talking to people, sharing with people over time. We did not have the kind of resources that the people who were pushing the death penalty had, so we lost and lost pretty badly. We didn't lose as badly in Douglas County. We still lost. We only lost by maybe 4, 5, 6 percentage points versus places where nobody was really teaching and organizing, and maybe just more inherently conservative places, they lost by 30%. So I would say the truth is what we've got, and then to help people realize elections have consequences. And if you're not getting out and voting and you're not getting informed, we're going to get people who will demonize and agitate. And so elections matter. Get out and vote. Inform your colleagues and your neighbors. And just keep trying to speak the truth. Because if you just shut down, nothing's going to get any better. You know, if you just say, oh, well, it's all fixed, well, nothing will ever change. But things do change. And elections do matter. And there's differences of attitudes when different people are in office. So, yeah.
Thank you. The second question is, can you talk about how effective calling and visiting elected officials is, and how effective are all the online petitions in comparison?
Yeah, so we do on certain issues, especially like immigration, you know, we are really doing a lot of teaching about the dreamers, the DACA recipients, as well as a program called Temporary Protected Status, which is another sort of form of helping someone get permanent status, but that it is a program that's ending. So doing a lot of teaching the community about how that works, and then encouraging them to call or email their senators. That's more of a national issue, not as much as a local or state. But I would say that visiting your senator, like going in, we have been a part of a lot of postcard hand-ins, where we go hand in a stack of like 300 postcards. You know, like that many people care about this issue, you can't keep ignoring it. So I would say that's really effective, or more effective. Definitely calling. I would say the online petitions aren't as useful. It does turn in a giant list of names, which is really good, but especially a form email. We'll get a lot of emails out there, but they're not, a lot of senators I've heard from, like the Nebraska state senators, they're like, if I know, if it has the same language as all the other emails I just got, I don't look at it, right? They want something personalized. They want to show that somebody actually typed out a message. So I would recommend doing the personal calls or personal emails over doing a form email or a petition.
I think that's right. The other thing I will say about why it's good to have house meetings and others to hear stories from people is those are stories then you can use. We always, at these public meetings that we have, we always get somebody to tell their story, to personalize it, because you're not only telling that to the elected officials, you're also telling it to all the other people in the audience who didn't realize that was going on. You're trying to both do the head side, the cognitive side, but you're also looking at the affective side. You're having somebody tell their story about why this matters to them. And so we've actually had a lot of success getting elected officials to meet with people like, for instance, immigrants who are affected by this, and having them go in and kind of tell their story and what they've been doing here and how hard they're working and the jobs they're holding down and how they're paying all their taxes. And you know, it's really hard to demonize somebody when you're looking at them and their children and you realize, you know, they're producing the meat that I'm eating. You know, they're paying taxes. You know, they're never going to draw out of Social Security, but they're putting in every week, every month. So meeting with people and trying to create spaces where they can tell their own genuine story also helps change hearts if they're willing to be changed. Not all hearts are willing to be changed, and that means it's kind of a question of power. You've got to demonstrate to them that there's a big constituency that wants change.
Thank you. And then the last one online that we had is you had a great example of OPPD organizing. Are there other smaller neighborhood projects your group has taken action on, or do they also volunteer on projects rather than influence change through politics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say people in the group are active in a lot of different organizations, and they do, you know, they help put on the annual Earth Day fair. They're active in their neighborhoods. They have community gardens, you know. So a lot of these are folks who really do live out their sustainability values in their own life. I think they tend to turn to OTOC when they want to try to change public policy, especially around elected officials. Other things people have worked on, or they've helped and tried to partner with people when they were fighting the chicken plant, you know, the Costco, and really tried to educate people about water. There's a water and food subcommittee that is really looking at how do we have more local agriculture, more growing, trying to make the state more environmentally sensitive. So I would say mostly OTOC is around public policy. I will show you, just because this is a good example that we don't always win. This was a fight that we got involved in 2014 or 15, right after OPPD did this very, you know, environmentally smart thing by creating a 20-year plan that said at least 33% will be environmentally sustainability, which, by the way, as it turns out, was easy for them to reach, and now at times they're over 50%. There's been times when they were over 50%. So 33% was a really low bar. We didn't realize it at the time, but because technology is changing so fast. Now, one of the challenges that creates is OPPD doesn't have the revenue streams that they once did, and they used to actually sell excess energy. That they would use coal, burn excess energy, and they could sell it to other utilities because the coal was so cheap, and that subsidized their energy operations. Well, now that they're in a power grid throughout the whole Southwest, and a lot of that is generated now by gas, they can't do that cheap coal-burning energy. And so they're looking for all kinds of ways to subsidize it. And in 2015, one of the things they did was to say, we want to increase your service fee, which is the cost that we charge to send you a bill and read your meter. And historically at OPPD and all across the country, that's typically been about $10 per month. That's kind of the national standard that says, okay, that's a reasonable part of your bill. Well, OPPD proposed they wanted to raise it to $35 a month. and they came up with the theory, well, that's really what it costs us. It's put it to all these different houses. And we said, well, why is everybody paying the same fee? That doesn't cost you the same thing to ship electricity to some place right here in the downtown Omaha as it does way out in some new suburb where you're having to build lines. Oh, no, it costs the same thing. And they kind of came up with a kind of a crazy rationale. The reality is they wanted to generate a certain amount of income every month that they could rely on in these very turbulent energy times. But what it did do, and this is kind of a way people get involved, if you look on the left hand of that chart, people who are small users, like 300 kilowatt hours a month, which is on a small apartment or somebody who's really careful about their energy, they're going to pay $151 a year more, all the way down to if you use about 9, because what they did was they're raising the monthly fee, but then they're lowering the rate. They were lowering the rate. So what that did is incentivize people to use more electricity. So low-use customers were paying $151 more, and those are largely elderly people, people living in apartments, poor people who are really conscious and can be careful of their energy. At about 900, it's equal, but if you're using 1,800 kilowatt hours, which is a big house with air conditioning going on, you're paying $229 less than you would have. We were opposed to that because it incentivizes waste and it puts the burden on poor people. We lost that battle. Now, we did a lot to fight it. We had got pastors and others, and we fought it. Some of you, we used the media, and it was kind of a cause, and we told poor people stories. That really helps. Stories matter. And ultimately, we pulled them out to, public meetings in December, when the churches were all dressed up for Christmas. We still got them to come out. And ultimately, as a result of that, we have a minimal result. They phased it in instead of 1 year over 5 years. They created a 5-year fund of $1.5 million to reduce the impact on low-income people, but it's going to end after 5 years. And they reduced the increase from 35 to 30. So are we involved in stuff? Sometimes we don't have the power to make things through. So now churches are involved in helping people deal with higher electric bills. So you don't always have the power to win. You got to get a victory where you can, and even in this one, we got a little bit of a victory where if we'd have done nothing, it wouldn't have been as good. So I just encourage you, wherever you're in the state, you can do something to make our country or your city, your school more sustainable, but you won't do very much if you don't build relationships with other people and build a team of people to work with. So encourage you to kind of think about what we talked about today to build a team. And again, if you've got questions or information, we'd be happy to share it with you. We'll send you back emails and connect you to resources. So thanks so much for Metro. Great,
thank you so much. So this presentation has been recorded and it'll be up on our website in about 1 to 2 weeks at cccneb.edu/SLPS, and that's also where you can find all of our past presentations. So that is actually the last SLPS of the 2017-2018 year, so the SLPS will return in the fall. So thank you so much for presenting today. Definitely learned a lot.